Hey, you're listening to a mainstream podcast from the high school ministry Xstream. We hope you enjoy.
How many of you guys have ever had this conversation like just kind of circles around the topic of like whose life is harder, girls or boys? How many of you guys have gotten that debate? Like who has it harder, who's better generally as a gender? Like, you know, like those little gender wars we have. Okay, so tell me the truth. Like who actually does have it harder? You really just have to say your own gender. Okay. I hear ya. You're right. Okay. No, so we were having this conversation a couple weeks ago as a staff. We were just like at lunch. We were like, what should we talk about? Let's talk about this. And so we're just talking. And, you know, there's all these things you bring up, like, well, men have to do this. Well, women have to do this. But, listen, I don't want to be like this, but there is definitely one thing that women can say in this conversation that usually gets us the win. And definitely as you get older, you can say it. And it's the thing that, like, your mom will never let you forget, okay? It's the thing that, like, she pulls out of her pocket every time you're like, I don't want to hang out with you, I want to hang out with my friends. It's the thing that she, like, whenever you're, like, giving her, like, a lot of attitude, what does she say? She's like, oh, I gave birth to you. Right? Like, mom will never let you know exactly how your birth went. You know exactly if she had a seat. Like, she told you all the details. You're like, I don't want to know about this, mom. But she told you because it was a significant moment in her life. So, having done that a couple times, I was like, let's end this conversation about boys and girls. Boom. Women. We have the children. That's it. Pretty hard. I don't know what to say. So, usually, that's it. Usually, it's the win. We got the dub. But I heard a response this time that I had never heard in my life before, and it really stunned me. So I say it, I'm like, well, you know, women, like, we have children, so I don't know, there's not much things harder than that. And so someone said, I won't tell you who, but it was a man, and he looked and he said, you mean the thing that your bodies were made to do? And I was like, how dare you talk to me? Okay, no, he really brought up a good point. And I sat there for a second and I was like, oh man, what am I going to say? And that's when God sort of dropped this deeper truth in my heart than what we were just talking about in that conversation. That's what I want to talk about for the next few minutes that we have together. It's the truth, and this is what it is. Sometimes you can be made for something, but it can still hurt. Sometimes you can absolutely be handcrafted, created since before God formed you in your mother's womb to do something. And yet, I am telling you, there will be moments where it hurts more than you could possibly imagine. And when that happens, what I think God needs you to know before the year is over is that just because it hurts doesn't mean that it wasn't made for you. Just because it hurts doesn't mean that it was fake, that the calling was fake, that you just made it up, that God's not powerful enough. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that some things that we are made to do come with a tremendous amount of pain. And I know that's like, what a great encouragement. No, but I need you to hear this because we're about to go into a season of great happiness, right? And it's Christmas, and it's awesome. But for some of us, Christmas and holiday times, it's not actually that fun, right? Like, you don't get to hang out with your friends. You go, like, fly to Ohio, and you have to spend 2 weeks with the family that you're like, I don't even like them. Like, and it's just, like, terrible Christmas break. It's horrible. And in those times, even if you don't have to do that, but you're just, like, chilling in your sweatpants, and you're, like, not even changing them for, like, 10 days. Like, how many of you guys do that on Christmas break? A lot of us. How many of us know what we learned from 2020 is most of us do not thrive when we are at home in our sweatpants for 10 days straight, not talking to anyone. So we're about to enter into that season. And in that season, what tends to happen is everyone has an identity crisis. You're here right now. But if you don't tune into what God is telling you tonight and hold on to this truth, I don't know that I'll see you on the first service in January, because the identity crisis that you're going to have over this break and the way the enemy is going to lie to you, telling you that if it was made for you, when it hurts so bad, you're going to believe it if you don't take in the truth tonight, and that I'm not going to see you in a few weeks. So I need you to tune into God's voice tonight, letting you know that pain is no indicator that God is not real, that God is not powerful, and that what you know you are called to do is not true. Sometimes pain is an indicator that you're doing exactly what he's asking you to do. So let's look at someone who survived a tremendous amount of pain. His name is Paul, and basically anytime you go to church, someone's talking about Paul or Jesus. They were very close to each other. And so Paul had a crazy testimony, and then he got saved, and then he wrote a big chunk of the Bible, and so he's a central figure here. He actually had crazy visions of like heaven, and like the Lord like swept him up, and like all this crazy stuff happened. So he's writing this letter to the Corinthian church, kind of letting them know why he doesn't really brag about those things, and kind of how God helps him in a very unconventional way. So in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7, we kind of catch the end of his statement, talking about why he won't brag, and he says, even though I've received wonderful revelations from God. So then he goes this, he says, so because I received wonderful revelations from God, because of that, this is what God did. To keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan. It's very serious. To torment me and keep me from becoming proud. 3 times I begged the Lord to take it away. And each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So then Paul says, so now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. And that is why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I need you to know this about your thorn. The thorn, first of all, it protects us from pride. The thorn protects us from pride. He says, even though I've received wonderful revelation, so to keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me. Okay, so if I'm reading this and I don't already know what the right answer to this is, I'm honestly thinking pride is that bad. I think most of us in this room, if we're being honest, we're like, I think I would rather have the pride than the thorn tormented, by Satan. I would rather not be visited by Satan if it means that I'll just exchange it for some pride. And we live in a world, like I said a little bit earlier, where pride is not something that's really condemned. The influencers we follow, the celebrities we see, they're all about pride, right? Look at me, give me money, follow me. This is my opinion, and because it's my opinion, it should be yours. Pride is something that's actually praised in our society. So where are we at? Where the Bible's so to fight your pride, I'm going to send a messenger from Satan to torment you. How does that make sense? I think a lot of us ask in our heart, is it really that serious? Because I don't like to suffer. I was in Baldwin Park a couple years ago, and how many of you guys know about Baldwin Park? Probably not. You don't even know. You think Nona is where the money's at, but you guys, there's this place called Baldwin Park, and that's where the old money is. That's where they've been rich for a while, and so I was not there because I lived there. I was there just driving through, probably going to a donut shop or something, and I'm driving through, and I see people outside of this really beautiful Spanish style mansion. And so it was a garage sale or an estate sale. So I'm dope, rich people, estate sale, let's go get some stuff. So I get out of the car and I'm oh, I love this. Look at this. This driveway is a mile long. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And I'm wow, there's definitely got to be some good stuff in here. So then I walk into the door and I am greeted by just such an overwhelming odor that I would not have expected. It was rotten garbage and old dog poop and just everything gross. And then I kind of look around and the house is in complete shambles. There really is just dog feces everywhere. There's broken furniture. The appliances don't work. You go upstairs, the kids' toys room. It's just everything's molded and disgusting. And what happened is that this family had kind of faced some really tragic things, and the way that the mom coped with it was kind of to just completely disconnect from her children, from taking care of them, herself, her house. And so no one in their neighborhood knew because how beautiful their house is on the outside, that it was being destroyed on the inside. That the outside represented beauty and the inside represented this sort of self-destruction that eventually became too much to handle, and instead of staying on the inside, it did have to come out because they had to move out of that house. And what I just described to you is what we look like when pride is a part of our life. Most prideful people look like they got it going on. And when we're really prideful, we can do it so well that we even appear to be fake humble. And so it's really hard for people to tell, except it's not hard for God to tell. And God is not just offended by our pride, so he wants to change it. The problem with our pride is what James 4:6 says, where it says that he gives grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. God gives grace to the humble, but he opposes, like meaning is rivaled, is against those with pride. So what is God saying when he's asking us to suffer to keep us humble? He's saying, man, I don't ever want to have to work against you. I don't want to ever have to be on the opposite team as you. And trust me, you don't want that either. So it would be better that there's pain if the pain will protect you from the pride. Because your thorn might hurt you. That thing that you can't get rid of, that part of your past you wish didn't exist, that sickness that you haven't been healed from yet, it might hurt you. But if God sent the thorn, can I tell you, it's not going to destroy you. However, at the end of pride is destruction. And so we have to reframe our mind to think when we're going through painful situations, it's not that God hates us, it's that he loves us so much that he's protecting us from ourselves so that he can give us grace because we will be humbled by our pain. Secondly, the thorn draws us to him. Paul says 3 different times, I beg the Lord to take it away. And most believe that this wasn't like take it away, no, take it away, no, take it away, no. Like it wasn't like 3 times like that. It was like 3 long seasons of like prayer, like continually going to God being like, please heal me from this. Please heal me from this. But if you see here, he says, I beg the Lord. You know what that means? It means he's talking to the Lord. How many of us in this room, close your eyes, how many of us in this room would say that we go to God more often when bad things are happening in our life? We go to God more often when we're suffering. How many of us would admit that there are times when life is so good that we forget about God? All right, you can open your eyes. All right, so just by that survey and from by being a human myself, I can tell you that most of us get closer to God when something bad happens. I mean, it's natural, like literally. I'm talking about small things, like when you're about to take the test you didn't study for. What do? Jesus, please help me to say amen. How many of you know you're on your way home in the car ride, your parents are dead silent because you know you're about to get beat when you get home, and you're just like in the car like, Jesus, I love you. Jesus, please help me, please help me, I'm sorry. Like we do these last minute emergency prayers because for some reason as human beings, we know that we can go to our God when things don't look great. And at the same time, when we're living blessed and we have that good season, it's so easy to forget him. It's unfortunate to say that usually it takes suffering to bring us near, but usually it takes suffering to bring us near. And Jesus suffered a lot, so that's how I know that. In Isaiah 53, this is how Jesus is described. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest grief. Man, we are called to be like Jesus. So there will be times in our life that we feel despised and rejected, and where we become very familiar with feeling grief because so did he. But you know what Jesus did with that grief? You know what Jesus did with that calling? In Luke 15:16, it says he often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. And if we will take our pain and let it take us to lonely places to pray, not lonely places to like watch Netflix, not lonely places to like be depressed, not lonely places to like watch whatever TikTok doctor or theologian is going to be speaking into our life that is so gross and nasty. No, not that. If we would withdraw to lonely places and pray, we would see that just because it hurts doesn't mean it wasn't made for us. And at the same time, there is a point where things can get so bad for so long that it tends to push us away from God, right? Like there's some things we can go through. You can have a bad day and then wake up tomorrow and your day could be better just because that's life. But there might be a situation so bad that you go to God because you're having a bad week. And you're like, God, I love you, God, I love you, God, I love you. But then when your bad week turns into a bad year, there's a very human part of us that starts to feel like, oh, we're not distancing ourselves from God, but he's distancing himself from us. I know he can heal this person, but he can't heal me. I know his love is endless, but I know he can't forgive me for that mistake that I made when I went back to my past. When the pain lasts too long, we can forget the reason for it. Sometimes the thorn exists because we wouldn't come to him without it. And if we could get ourselves together, I'm telling you, I'll be the first one. Like, if we could just always praise God on the mountaintop when we're thriving, when we have all the friends, and we look so cute, and we have so many followers, if we could really do that, I don't know if we would suffer as much. But I know that my God's ways are higher than my ways. And I know that his thoughts are higher than my thoughts. So even though I think, Lord, I will still pray all the time. If you would just do this, he knows that I'm full of it. And he values my relationship with him more than probably he values my approval of what he does. And so sometimes the thorn comes so that we will be drawn to him, even if it's just to pray that he would take it away. And then lastly, the thorn makes us strong. Each time that Paul prayed, God responded and said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now Paul says, I'm glad to boast about it so that the power of Christ can work through me. I want you to think right now in your head, you don't have to say it out loud, but like, what's your thorn? What's that thing? What's that thing you're embarrassed of? What's that thing in your life that if you had a chance to change it, you would change it? What is that thing that you can't shake? What is that thing that's been coming to the forefront of your mind since I started talking? Now I want you to think about that thing, and I want you to entertain the idea that maybe God is going to use that exact thing that you see as such a weakness, and he is going to turn it in to your biggest strength. Only he can do stuff like that. Can I give you like a real life example? One of my best friends in the whole world, she was abused when she was little. She was taken advantage of for years and years and years by her neighbor that her family really trusted, super close family friend. Finally, when they moved, it stopped. It only stopped because they moved out of the state. But she still had to see that person, still had to see his wife, still had to see his kids, still had to be around him because no one knew. So she struggled with this for like decades. And then at one point, she finally decided to tell her parents. And her parents didn't believe her. Her parents didn't want to talk about it. It had kind of been a pattern in the life of that family that all the girls were abused. So it almost didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. But it was a big deal to my friend. And she was crushed to see such a lack of belief and support from her parents. And so I'm telling you, like, because some of you have been through this, it was dark for her. And it seemed like there was no way out. And there wasn't a ton of people talking about this back then. So she had to fight, and she had to pray, and she had to really lean into God's healing sovereignty over her life. Can I tell you now, though, that she has helped a countless number of people who went through the same thing that she went through, who didn't know who they could talk to. She has been able to share her story with them and let them know, hey, I've been through it. And I also came out on the other side, and I'm alive, and I'm better than I would have been because of it. Who can say that? Who can say that about something so egregious happening to them? Only someone who has given that pain to God. That is now her strength. Now when we have people at the altars, when we have people going through that situation, I'm like, man, I have someone you can talk to. And can I tell you, she didn't have someone to talk to, but now she is the one to talk to, because God can take our weakness and show his strength through it. Maybe she would still change what happened to her, but I have been firsthand seeing what God can do when we don't take our pain and assume he doesn't want us. But when we can really understand that even though it hurts, I was made for this. You know that God can take your past. God can take your failures. God can take your parents' messy divorce. He can take your time that you spent in the foster care system. He can take your weakness. He can take your doubts. He can take your anxiety. He can take everything that you hate about yourself and wish that he would change. He could instead take it and make you strong through it. And you can know that even though it hurts, you were made for this. And if you were made for it, then it means that you can do it. And that nothing could stop what God has planned for you. If you can hold on through the pain, then he will take you places you never thought you could go. And you will be on the other side of it one day, telling other people that they could come with you, telling other people going through that same thing, hey, I've been there and I can help you get out. I can show you to Jesus. I can bring you to the person who brought me out. And all of a sudden, that horrible thing that happened in your life is now being used to bring people into eternal life, knowing Jesus. Paul said, for when I am weak, then I am strong.
Thank you for listening to a Mainstream Orlando podcast. We hope you join us again soon.